I saw her. It wasn't in a dream, nor in a reverie fueled by insecurity. It wasn't by chance. It was fate, or perhaps it's irony. She was there, in the restaurant where her parents always insisted on celebrating everything, birthdays, promotions, even those pointless dinners that only very close-knit families have. Sitting next to a man I'd never met, but whom she introduced as her husband. She didn't stutter, she didn't hesitate. She smiled. She toasted with her parents, her siblings, the children of the family. Her eyes shone as if I had never existed. And I was a few meters away, standing there, with a bouquet of flowers in my hand. I had spent the whole week choosing the perfect gift for the dinner. Her father had texted me on Wednesday, "We're expecting you on Saturday, as always. It's going to be special." Special. Yes, it was special. It was the end of everything. The end of the illusion. The end of who I was. I approached the table as if I were outside my own body. Each step weighed more than the last. Sweat dripped down my back even in the freezing air conditioning. The sounds of laughter, the clinking of silverware, the children playing around, everything seemed so normal, so happy. Except me. With every inch I closed the distance between myself and her, the world around me became more blurred. My blood pounded in my ears. My soul began to crumble even before I arrived. When I finally stopped beside the table, she saw me. Her smile slowly faded, like the last flame of a candle. She said nothing. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just looked away, as if she already knew she would be discovered. As if she knew this moment would come. And in that second, it wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the coldness. The acceptance. The certainty that she had stopped loving me a long time ago. No one at the table understood immediately. Her parents exchanged confused glances. Her sister put down her fork. The man, that new husband, looked at me, not understanding who I was. And I didn't say anything either. I had nothing to say. Any words would be insufficient in the face of what was happening. I took a deep breath, left the flowers on one of the empty chairs, and simply left. But inside, I wasn't leaving. I was staying there, shattered, frozen in the moment I realized that the love of my life had chosen someone else, and didn't even have the decency to hide it. That night, time stood still. I cried silently, lying in the dark room of the house where she and I had shared every plan, every detail, every promise. I relived everything. From our first meeting to the last morning she gave me a hurried kiss before leaving for work, and perhaps she was already going to meet that man. I relived the lazy Sundays, the impromptu dinners, the plans for children that would never come. It was like watching my own life crumble without being able to do anything. The pain of betrayal isn't just about the love that's lost, but about the identity that crumbles. Who was I with her? Who am I now, without her? The following days were a blur. I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. Friends were trying to convince me to go out, but even the sunlight seemed to mock my pain. And her? She moved on. She stayed with him. She appeared with him on social media, at events, at dinners. Apparently happy. At least for a while. But what began with smiles and impeccable photographs gradually turned to silence. Little by little, she disappeared from social media, from the places we frequented together, from the memories of her family who, until then, still called me to see if I was okay. Until one day, everything stopped. And when I thought I would never hear from her again, fate, always fate, made sure to put an end to it with exquisite cruelty. Months passed. Maybe more than a year. I slowly learned to breathe again. Life began to restore its color to me. I met a new woman, calm, serene, with sweet words and eyes that saw beyond my pain. She didn't ask anything of me, she just stayed. And she stayed until I started wanting to stay too. I began to see myself in her plans. I began to imagine different Sundays. I began, finally, to live. Until one day, on the most ordinary of days, I saw her again. My ex alone. Sitting in the same coffee shop we used to frequent. Her hair haphazardly tied up. Tired eyes. An open book in front of her that she wasn't reading. She looked at me and, for a second, that extinguished sparkle tried to reignite. She smiled, a sad smile, almost a cry for help. I nodded. And I left. There was nothing left there. There was no more love. Only memories. Only regret. Days later, she tried to contact me. She sent a long message, full of apologies, memories, and phrases that said, if I could go back in time. But she couldn't. Nobody can. Time, as it passes, takes with it everything we let slip through our fingers. And she let it slip away. She let our love slip away for someone who only wanted the moment, while I offered forever. And forever doesn't wait. I answered honestly. I said I forgave her. Because forgiving isn't forgetting, it's setting free. But I also said there was no more room for it. The love I had died the day she pretended not to know me. The day she preferred the convenience of a desire to the depth of a feeling. She thanked me, said she understood. But I know she doesn't understand. Because whoever understands doesn't lose. Whoever understands, cares. And she didn't care. She destroyed. Today, she lives surrounded by emptiness. Her family, who once welcomed me as a son, never looked at her the same way again. The man for whom she traded everything disappeared without saying goodbye. The promises he made evaporated. And she, for the first time, felt firsthand what it is to be forgotten. She felt the weight of looking back and seeing that what she valued most was left behind, and now belongs to another world, another love, another time. And me? I moved on. Stronger. More whole. With scars, it's true. But with the peace of someone who knows they did everything right and, even so, had to let go. Because loving is also knowing when to leave when love turns to pain. But what truly destroyed what remained of her wasn't the loss, nor the loneliness, nor even the regret. It was the moment when, by chance, she saw me again, not alone, not hurt, not waiting. But happy. With someone who looked at me with genuine admiration. Someone who gave me the love she had wasted. Someone who filled the space she had emptied with her own absence. And there, in that second, her eyes said it all. The pride that once made her choose to leave no longer existed. There was only the silence of someone who knows, deep in their soul, that they have lost the love of their life forever. And yet, deep down in that pain, there was a question that never left her, a question that perhaps even she didn't know how to ask, but which held all the answers to who we once were. What if I hadn't cheated? This is the story of how you lose everything because of one choice. And how, sometimes, the real punishment, is realizing too late the value of what you had. Welcome to the channel. Here, we don't romanticize betrayal, we condemn it. All the stories told are fictional, but inspired by the harsh reality of those who have had their hearts broken by selfish choices. Our purpose is clear, to show how betrayal destroys lives, corrodes homes, and leaves scars that time cannot erase. Get ready to dive into a story. Shocking, intense, and real, like the pain of someone who has been betrayed. Press play. Let the drama begin. Welcome to the channel. Here, betrayal is not entertainment, it's a warning. All stories are fictional, however, they carry profound emotional truths. Our goal is simple, to show how a wrong choice can ruin true love and leave irreversible scars. Prepare your heart, you are about to hear a story. Shocking, cruel, and unforgettable. Let's begin. At first, it was easy to believe they were the right couple, at the right time, doing everything as it should be done. Emily had the kind of presence that lit up places without needing to say a word, a serene, almost unconscious elegance that made people notice her for the way she listened more than she spoke, and for the way she only smiled when something truly touched her. Michael, on the other hand, was the type who carried the world in his eyes. Observant, reserved, with a gentleness that didn't come from effort, but from a nature shaped by respect and the silence of the losses he suffered before meeting her. They met in an autumn that seemed to have been designed just for that, the light wind, the orange leaves falling in slow motion, and chance conspiring in their favor at every step. A chance meeting, an apology that turned into conversation, a conversation that turned into laughter, and, without either of them realizing it, they were arranging a second date before the first one even ended. In the first few months, everything felt new, but not rushed. Michael had an almost old-fashioned way of loving, the kind that sends messages asking if she arrived safely, walks on the outside of the sidewalk, remembers the name of a sick friend and asks about her days later. Emily, after a previous frustrating relationship, found a security she didn't know existed. Someone who didn't demand anything from her, who didn't suffocate her, but who also didn't disappear. He was present in the details, in the small gestures that no one else saw. And she surrendered herself without fear. For the first time, she felt she didn't need to hide her vulnerabilities. He listened even to what she didn't say. And she allowed herself to exist with all her parts, without molding herself to fit expectations. The relationship blossomed over time, like those plants that don't need excessive care, just the right light and the right soil. The families quickly became involved. Michael's father, a man of few words and firm opinions, commented at a Sunday lunch that Emily was the first woman he'd seen with his son and thought, "She's the one." Emily's mother, traditional and with a discerning eye for everything, confessed in a low voice to her daughter one afternoon while they were tidying the kitchen together that this young man had a way about him that would never let her be cold, neither in body nor soul. Over time, dinners became frequent, holidays were shared between the two families, and each other's names became part of their routine, their lives, their skin. They bought a modest apartment together, full of windows and natural light, with a balcony where Michael grew basil and Emily kept books stacked next to her rocking chair. They weren't in a hurry, but they also had no doubts. Michael worked in graphic design at an advertising company and spent much of his time at home, which made him even more present in her daily life. He would make coffee while she finished getting ready, leaving notes with short phrases, "I love you more today," or "You are my calm," stuck to her computer screen. Emily, on the other hand, worked as a project manager at a technology company and was known for her firm stance, discreet leadership, and unwavering ethics. When she came home from work, she liked to take off her shoes and lie on the sofa, with her legs over his, recounting every detail of her day. He listened attentively, alternating between questions and laughter. It was a ritual. Almost sacred. To others, they were an example of partnership. Friends commented on how rare it was to see two adults balancing career and love with such harmony. On birthdays, they exchanged meaningful gifts, never just objects, but things that carried stories, a restored old photograph, a handwritten letter, a framed ticket to the movie they saw on their first date. Michael, though discreet, liked to surprise. Once, after a difficult week at work for Emily, he scattered photos of the two of them around the house, with messages written on the back. Emily, even when tired, insisted on cooking his favorite recipe on Sundays. Love resided in the little things. Of course, like any couple, they also had their disagreements. They argued about the amount of time she spent on her cell phone when they were together, or about his forgetfulness in simple tasks, like taking out the trash. But these were never hurtful fights, they were disagreements that taught them something. Dialogue was the rule. It always had been. When Michael felt she was distant, he would ask. When Emily noticed he was feeling uneasy, she wouldn't rest until he opened up. They understood each other. And, more than that, they respected each other. It was a solid construction, built day after day, with conscious choices, with promises that didn't come from impulses, but from convictions. It was in this context of stability and mutual commitment that something began to change, so subtly that it was almost imperceptible. First, her work hours became more unpredictable. Then, the once long conversations began to shorten. Her cell phone became more present than eye contact. Her replies to messages became drier, less frequent. Michael, who knew her silences, noticed the changes but preferred to believe it was just a phase. A new work demand, perhaps. A passing stress. He chose to trust, as he always had. He didn't want to question too much so as not to invade the space she had always cherished. But something, even if he couldn't explain what, began to hurt silently inside him. Dinner with her family was scheduled for the following Saturday, one of those events he already considered part of the couple's routine. She seemed excited, at least outwardly. She'd said she wanted the dinner to be special, that she'd prepared a surprise for her parents. Michael thought it was lovely. He considered buying flowers for her mother, as he always did, and bringing that Argentinian wine her father liked. He was anxious. He prepared himself as one prepares for an important occasion. He arrived early, as usual. The car was parked in the same spot as always, his hands slightly sweating with silly nervousness. But it wasn't the nervousness he knew. There was something more. Perhaps it was the way her eyes avoided his throughout the week. Or the fact that she no longer mentioned him in conversations with colleagues during video meetings. Or the way she had spent the last 3 Sundays distant, even though she was right beside him. True love perceives before it sees. Michael sensed that something wasn't right. But he was never the type to give in to fear. He always believed that trust was the foundation of everything. And, however different things had become, he still believed that between them there was something greater than any bad phase. On the day of the dinner, he chose the blue shirt she always said brought out his eyes. He finished work early, stopped by the flower shop, and texted her to let her know he was on his way. Her phone didn't answer. But that wasn't unusual. Sometimes she'd forget to put it on silent. While driving, he mentally reviewed jokes to tell his father-in-law, recent stories to share with his brothers-in-law. He thought about what next Christmas would be like, maybe in another state, maybe traveling together. Michael always made plans with her at the center of everything. Even amidst life's uncertainties, there was one certainty that guided him, Emily. Upon arriving at the restaurant, he felt a slight tension in his chest. Something he couldn't name. But he smiled when he saw his relatives gathered. He waved. He quickened his pace, flowers in hand. He was ready for another chapter of that story which, until then, seemed unshakable. Nothing had prepared him for what was to come. But that's another part of the story. The restaurant silence was broken only by the muffled sounds of conversations and the clinking of cutlery, but to Michael, all of that seemed distant, irrelevant, as if it had been ripped from time and placed in a space where only one sound existed, that of his own heart beating out of rhythm, as if trying to warn him of what he didn't yet know, but was about to see. He took 2 steps forward, the bouquet of flowers firmly held between his fingers, a shy smile about to appear on his face, and it was at that moment that reality hit him with brutal force. At the main table, among the family members who had known him for years, sat Emily. Beside her, seated confidently, was the man he had never seen before. Their hands were intertwined on the white tablecloth, as if that gesture were ancient and natural. Her father smiled, raising his glass in an informal toast, and the sound of laughter mingled with the bitter taste that rose in Michael's throat. Emily spoke in the calm voice of someone with nothing to hide, and it was then that he heard the words that would change the rest of his life: "I want everyone to meet my husband." For a moment, time stood still. The word husband pierced the air like a cold blade. Michael stood there, motionless, trying to understand if it was a misunderstanding, a joke, a coincidence. But her expression, serene and distant, left no room for doubt. It was real. She saw him. She knew he was there. And yet, she didn't hesitate to follow the script she had prepared. The flowers he held slipped from his hand and fell to the floor, but no one noticed the soft sound of the petals hitting the marble floor. He took a step forward, his hoarse voice escaping in an almost inaudible tone, a whisper of disbelief, "Emily." She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his, and in that look there was no surprise, only the cold discomfort of someone who expected this could happen at any moment. The man beside her frowned, confused, and Emily's father looked from one to the other, uncomprehending. Michael opened his mouth to say something, anything that would make sense, but nothing came out. The pain was so intense that words seemed useless. Emily tried to speak, but the air caught in her throat. I can explain, she murmured, but he already knew that explanations wouldn't change anything. The truth was there, naked and irreversible. Her father stood up, stunned, asking what was happening. Her mother, confused, looked at her daughter as if trying to decipher a riddle. Emily's new husband stood up defensively, asking, "Who is he?" It was at that moment that the ground seemed to open up beneath them all. Michael looked around, the perplexed faces, the collective discomfort growing like a shadow. He took a deep breath, trying to hold on to what remained of his dignity, and simply said, "I am her husband." The murmur that spread across the table was almost inaudible, but the tension was sharp. Emily lowered her eyes, unable to bear the weight of anyone's gaze. Her father, his face rigid and his voice trembling with disbelief, asked, "Is that true, Emily?" Her silence was the cruelest confirmation Michael had ever experienced. The man beside her took a step back, stunned, as if he too had been betrayed in some way. "You said you were separated," he whispered, and her expression crumbled. "I was going to tell you," she replied, her voice faltering, "I just didn't know how." Michael closed his eyes for a second, as if that could erase what was before him, but there was no escape. Everything he had built, every memory, every gesture of love, was now tainted by the lie. He didn't scream. He didn't make a scene. He just looked at her for a long moment, his gaze filled with a serene, almost resigned pain, and said softly, in a tone that cut through the air, "You could have left me sooner. Anything would have hurt less than this." Then he turned his back and left, under the stunned gazes of his family and the absolute silence that filled the room. Outside, the cold night air hit him like a blow. He walked aimlessly, trying to understand how an entire life could crumble in a few seconds. In the days that followed, Emily tried to contact him. Short messages, unanswered calls, emails that began with, "Please listen to me." But Michael couldn't. Every word she said sounded like a reopened wound. He didn't want hatred, nor revenge, just distance. Emily, in turn, began to deal with consequences she hadn't imagined. The man for whom she had traded everything disappeared soon after the mess. She tried to find him, but he didn't answer, didn't reply. When she finally found him, in a coffee shop weeks later, he was direct, without beating around the bush, "You lied. You put me in the middle of something I didn't want. I'm not going to be a part of this." And he left, without looking back. Alone, Emily was forced to confront the weight of her choices. Her family, once proud and welcoming, could now barely look at her without averting their gaze. Her disappointed father refused to talk. Her mother wept silently, trying to understand how her daughter had become the woman who lied so naturally. The apartment she had shared with Michael was empty. Every corner carried his presence, every smell a reminder of everything that had been destroyed. She began to realize that true love doesn't disappear, it's abandoned, and when it's abandoned, it transforms into regret. Meanwhile, Michael began to rebuild what remained of himself. At first, it was just survival, waking up, working, eating, trying to sleep. But little by little, he began to free himself. He met someone by chance, on an ordinary morning, and this time he wasn't in a hurry. He was different, more mature, more cautious. There was now a weariness in him that made him more genuine, and a peace that came from understanding that you can't save someone who chooses to lose themselves. Months later, on a gray afternoon, fate decided to reunite them once more. Emily was walking distractedly down the street, her face tired, her shoulders hunched under the weight of her own guilt, when she saw him. Michael was sitting on the other side of the sidewalk, drinking coffee and smiling. Next to him, a woman. There was nothing spectacular about her, but there was something essential, tranquility. The kind of peace that Emily had destroyed. They laughed together, exchanging light glances, like those who build something solid. She stopped, observing in silence, her heart racing and tears rising unintentionally. For a moment, she thought about crossing the street, saying something, asking for forgiveness, trying to understand if there was still room. But the answer was there, clear, in the way he held the new woman's hand, the same way he once held hers, securely, tenderly, with a love that didn't need to be spoken. Michael saw her. For a brief second, their eyes met. He didn't stand up, didn't hide, didn't smile. He simply acknowledged her with a short, polite, respectful nod, and went back to talking to the woman beside him. This simple gesture, devoid of anger, was the final blow. Emily felt her chest collapse. It was like watching the love that had once been everything transform into a distant memory, incapable of arousing any emotion beyond indifference. Back home, she cried until her body ached. She remembered the mornings they spent together, the promises, the times he waited for her at the door just to see her smile before leaving. She remembered how he used to say, "Everything will be all right," even when nothing seemed to be going right. And she understood, belatedly, that that kind of love doesn't come back, because it's too rare to be wasted. That night, alone in her apartment, Emily picked up her cell phone and wrote one last message: "I saw you today. I was happy to see you're okay. I'm so sorry, truly, for everything." And before sending it, she deleted it. She realized there was nothing more to say. The lesson was already written in her own life: love that is betrayed doesn't die suddenly, it tires, withdraws silently, and is reborn elsewhere, with another person. And the one who betrays is condemned to watch from afar what they lost flourish in hands that would never hurt them. That same night, Michael looked at the sky before falling asleep. He felt peace, not resentment. He thought of her, but only as one remembers a story that has come to an end. His heart, once wounded, now beat calmly. He had learned that forgiveness is not for those who have erred, it's for those who want to move on. And as he closed his eyes, he understood that he had finally managed to do so. Months passed with the cold gentleness of someone who doesn't care if anyone is suffering or not. Time simply moved on, oblivious to the pain, the open wounds, and the stories broken in half. For Emily, each new day was like walking down a corridor of closed doors, all the options she once had, now locked from the inside, without a key, without a way back. She tried to move on, but everything around her screamed for what was lost. The silent apartment, the photos taken from their frames, the dinners that were now just for one. Sundays were long, and the late afternoons became a punishment that hurt more than the betrayal she had committed. The little reminders offered no respite. His laughter, the details of the routine, the way he always cared even on the days she didn't deserve it. No word was more cruel than the absolute silence that came from him now. She tried to rebuild her life, but discovered, too late, that some things can't be repaired when broken the way she was broken. Friendships dwindled, invitations ceased. Even those who tried to understand her couldn't ignore the cold way she had trampled on something so pure. Her family no longer spoke with the same tenderness. Her father, who had always seen her as an example of integrity, could now barely look her in the eye. Her mother avoided the subject, but the discreet tears at the table spoke louder than any judgment. She felt the rejection in the eyes of others, in the lack of questions about her life, in the way she was treated as a figure from the past. She became an uncomfortable presence in gatherings that were once warm. She was there, but she no longer belonged. As for the man for whom she destroyed her world, he vanished like dust in the wind. He left no trace, no explanation. When she tried to rekindle the relationship, she received only indifference. He didn't care, and perhaps he never had. The great passion that seemed to justify everything revealed itself to be merely a whim, a distraction, something that couldn't even withstand the first storm. Emily finally understood that she had been disposable. That she had traded the eternal for the momentary. That she had destroyed something true for a fleeting desire that evaporated. And this awareness was a burden that didn't lessen with time, it only became clearer, more painful, more definitive. Meanwhile, Michael continued on his path with firm but calm steps. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He only wanted peace. And he found it. His life was carefully rebuilt, without haste, without noise. He met someone who didn't come to fill a void, but to walk alongside him. A simple woman, but with a wholehearted gaze. She didn't need to try to be noticed, she simply was. The love between them wasn't born from promises or attempts to erase the past, but from the meeting of two hearts that knew the value of loyalty. He learned to smile again, without fear. He felt seen, respected, loved without needing to doubt. The scars were still there, but they no longer hurt. They only told a story he no longer needed to relive, only to remember when necessary. One day, he received a letter. Handwritten, in handwriting he knew by heart. Emily had decided to write, perhaps as a final plea for redemption, or perhaps because she finally understood that she needed to face what she had done. In the letter, she didn't offer empty apologies. She didn't try to justify what has no justification. She simply recounted how life had become colorless, how the days had grown heavy, how his absence had become a constant ghost. She said that she looked at herself and no longer recognized herself. That she had traded love for vanity, presence for novelty, and that now all that remained was regret. Michael read in silence, without haste, letting each word find its place. At the end of the letter, she said, "I'm not asking you to come back. I know I can't. I just needed you to know how much I lost when I let you go." He didn't answer. Not out of coldness, but because he understood there was nothing more to be said. That was the end. A necessary, clean end, with no turning back. He put the letter in a drawer, not out of attachment, but as someone who recognizes that certain pains teach more than advice. Emily never knew, but he cried while reading it. He cried for the pain he had endured, for the innocence he had lost, and for all the love that had once existed between them. But, upon finishing, he wiped away his tears and returned to the room where his new companion was reading silently, her feet on his, smiling with her eyes when she saw him return. There, in that look, he understood that true love doesn't die. It simply changes location. And when it finds space, it blossoms again, stronger, more serene, wiser. Emily, on the other hand, continued living with the weight of the choices she had made. She returned to the coffee shop where it all began. She sat at the same table where Michael had last seen her. She ordered the same coffee, left her phone on the table, and looked out at the street as if waiting for a miracle. But nothing happened. The world went on without looking at her. She cried softly, not because she missed him, but because she missed herself, the woman she had been before she lost herself. As she left, she noticed her own reflection in the shop window, a woman who, in the eyes of the world, still had time to start over, but who knew inside that the love of her life was no longer available. And that was the true end. Not an explosive end, nor a theatrical tragedy. But a human end, painfully real. The kind of end that doesn't need words to be understood. An end where one moved on, and the other remained stuck in time. An end where forgiveness came, but not the return. Where life, without haste, collected everything that seemed to have been forgotten. And where the broken heart was mended, while the betrayer remained forever broken. If you've made it this far, this story has surely touched you in some way. Comment below what you thought, give your honest opinion. Have you ever been through something similar? Have you known someone who has experienced something like this? Your story can help other people too. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming stories. Here, every week, you'll hear impactful accounts that show the value of true love and the devastating consequences of wrong choices. Remember, cheating isn't just about wronging the other person, it's about destroying everything that was built with time, affection, and trust. Betrayal doesn't only affect the person who is betrayed. It breaks families, wounds bonds, and corrodes what should be most sacred, commitment. Regret comes, but it doesn't always come with a second chance. May this story serve as a warning to those who think someone's heart is disposable. This channel does not support any type of betrayal. Our commitment is to show, through fiction, the real impact of decisions that seem fleeting, but leave lasting scars. Until the next story. And remember, loyalty is not an obligation, it's a choice. Choose wisely.